Welcome. My name is Jamae Bliven with Innovate Educate, a nonprofit out of Santa Fe that has been working the last 12 plus years on the future of working and learning based on skills. And obviously, teacher education has always been critical to our state and to our state's future. So we're thrilled to include this session as part of the National Summit. Close It is a national summit that communities all across the country, and this event shared with the Close It community, and really honored and thrilled to have you all today. Welcome, Missy, and your to today's session, and I'm going to just turn it over to you to kick it off.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you so much for allowing us to do this recruitment roundtable event in collaboration with you. And to get us going, I'd love if you would all take a minute to chat in your name, where you're zooming in from right now, your role, and which New Mexico image most represents how you're feeling entering this session today. As you do that, I want to thank you so much for being here today. We know you all have lots of things competing for your attention, and we're heartened that you chose to be here with us. My name is Missy Juanica, and I work with Teach for America New Mexico. I started my career in education with Teach for America New Mexico in 2005 in Theru on the Navajo Nation. I taught for 9 years, got national board certified, became a school leader at the Native American Community Academy Charter School for 4 years before joining Teach for America New Mexico staff. At Teach for America New Mexico, we start events with an acknowledgement of the land and tribes that reside here. Land acknowledgements can help raise awareness and combat the erasure of Native representation in the media, in statistics, or in conversations about things like teacher recruitment. Most of today's guests are zooming in from different parts of New Mexico, so we wanted to take a few moments to name the 23 sovereign nations within New Mexico's borders. I also want to encourage you as a call to action to follow the amazing organizations listed below on social media, some of whom are on this call with us today. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to hear next from the Los Alamos National Laboratory Foundation about their teacher recruitment and retention report, move into our moderated discussion, then feature bright spots in New Mexico teacher recruitment. This event came together based on the truth that New Mexico has had a teacher shortage for a long time and growing data showing that young people aren't planning to pursue careers in education. This trend is concerning, but this event was also born from the hope that we are in a moment when innovation is happening at every level of the education system, including resources for things like recruiting diverse groups of teachers, micro-certifications, innovative mentorship opportunities, etc. We hope you all feel inspired and that you learn something you can use in your own settings, be it a new idea, new connection, or resource. I also want to name that this event focuses specifically on teacher recruitment, but we know that recruitment is just one piece of a complex system of preparing and retaining educators. We believe recruitment is an area that specifically can use attention and collaboration, but not at the expense of the other pieces. We hope to have future conversations that hone in on other areas of the continuum. Before we get into it, we want to take a moment to recognize that New Mexico recently lost someone who had a big impact on teacher recruitment and education. lifetime educator and education leader, Dr. Karen Trujillo. Let's take a moment of silence to acknowledge her legacy. Thank you. We're thankful to our guests and our partners in this work, Innovate Educate, Del Norte Love Foundation, and UBS Financial Services, as well as the Los Alamos National Laboratory Foundation. Lano Foundation's research on teacher recruitment and retention in northern New Mexico was the foundation upon which this event was built. With that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Mike DeBrio and Dr. Kirsty Tyson from Lano Foundation to share some of their findings.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I hope you're all doing great. It's so good to be here. I feel very excited about this as a former TFA core member, a former NACA Inspired Schools Network Leadership Fellow, and the current Education Enrichment Director at the Lano Foundation. I feel a certain connectivity to everyone that's presenting and talking today. Also, they all probably have a lot of embarrassing stories about me, but hopefully they won't share any of those. It's spring in New Mexico. Spring is has a particular time of new beginnings, and I think this year New Beginnings has a whole different feeling from coming out of our houses, which we've literally been trapped in for the past year. It also is a time for planting and thinking about the future and how we're going to prepare for the upcoming summer months and plant our crops and fields. And what better time to think about how we plant the seeds of our future teachers. And this work that we're talking about today is really focused on that and thinking about how do we connect with those teachers that are going to be there in 10, 20 years from now. At the Lano Foundation, our focus is driven by to inspire excellence in education and learning in northern New Mexico. You can go to the next slide, Missy or Rebecca. For 25 years, we have worked towards this mission and vision, and our commitment is grounded in the communities that we serve. You can go to the next one. For those 25 years, we focus on the 7 counties surrounding Los Alamos, and including 18 Native American tribal nations and the counties listed there. Over 400,000 people live in this region, and we have a special dedication to the teachers and educators and students that reside there. Today, I have the proud opportunity to introduce Dr. Kirsty Tyson, who is my friend and colleague, who is our Director of Evaluation and Learning. As our Director of Evaluation and Learning, Dr. Tyson focuses on how we as a foundation can better serve our communities and how effective is our work in reaching those milestones. Formerly at the Public Education Department in Teacher Quality and at the University of New Mexico as an associate professor teaching math methods to students and supporting graduate students. Kirsty has been planting the seeds of future teachers for many years, and I appreciate the work that she's done and excited to hear and have her share about our work. So Dr. Kirsty Tyson.
Thank you, Michael, and greetings. It's good to see so many faces that are connected to this work. And this talk is going to be pretty quick. And what I invite you to do, if you can go to the next slide, is to come to the Lano Foundation's website and read the research report and the policy brief if you haven't, if you want to dig into further ideas. This research report started in the fall of 2019 when the Learning Alliance of New Mexico bravely went out and collected surveys from students and did focus groups with teachers and students. We collected surveys from teachers and students too. All told, we had 742 teachers participate in this study and 565 students. all from the 32 districts in our region. And also if you include charter schools and tribally controlled schools and BIE schools. Next slide, please. So what did we learn from students? And again, this is just really high level information, but I think the statistic that really stood out to a lot of people is that of those 565 students, 3% of those students were interested in majoring in education. Meanwhile, almost all of the students who participated in the surveys and the focus group had plans for what they wanted to do after high school. And interestingly enough, I think another highlight to point out is that about half, or about 45% of the students were interested in STEM fields or health fields. And so I think that that's an important thing to think about, especially since that's a high need area in teaching. Next slide, please. So what did we learn from teachers? I think one of the most important findings from this is that local community teachers, so teachers who are teaching in the area where they grew up, are the teachers who are most likely to attend New Mexico's institutions of higher education, and they are most likely to live, work, and stay in the communities where they teach. In addition, local community teachers are also more likely to earn bilingual and TESOL certification rather than the non-local teachers. And I don't think this is about saying that we need only local teachers versus non-local teachers, but I think it's also important to attend to the fact that local teachers are a real resource for our community. And so how can we increase and tap into that? The other piece that really stood out is that strong teacher preparation matters. Teachers from traditional programs were more satisfied and committed to the profession, whereas alternatively prepared teachers felt woefully underprepared. And again, I don't think this is about saying that traditional programs are better than alternative programs. I think what we've learned in the last 25 years in New Mexico is that both pathways have a place, and different kinds of teacher preparation programs in our state have a place. But how do we make sure those programs are really preparing the teachers for the work that we need to do? The other thing that I think is really important to notice is that almost all the teachers who participated in this survey and in the focus groups indicated the importance of collaboration for their ongoing professional learning. So that takes me to the next slide. Okay, the point of this slide is that basically we have recommendations in 3 areas. So one, how do we prioritize support for local community teachers? How do we reimagine and focus teacher preparation programs? And how do we strengthen school leadership and professional learning for our teachers? Also attending to pay. And I think the point of this slide is that this is collaborative work. It's not one entity who's going to address any of these issues, but it's all of us together doing that. Which takes me to the next slide, please. Okay. And if you can just click all the way through, please. Thank you. So the key here, I think, is to ask this question, which is working together, how can we make New Mexico the best place for educators to work? Maybe New Mexico will never be the most high-paying state, but what if it is the best state for teachers to work in? The ways that we need to attend to that is we need to make sure that our teachers feel valued and supported in their communities. We need higher education and districts to partner together to recruit and prepare teachers so that they are ready culturally and to teach our culturally and linguistically diverse students, and that their work is grounded in the science of learning and development. We need to make sure that our principals and superintendents have what they need and the support they need to support the teachers and the children and the families in their schools. And next, I think COVID has really helped us to think through this, which is how can we design structures that really support teachers' collaboration and ongoing professional learning as part of their regular work. So together, if you can hit one more point, our goal needs to be that New Mexico needs an education ecosystem that supports children's whole child development. And with that, I invite you, next slide, please, to continue the conversation. I know this was very fast, but I think that the panel, what I want to do is get to the panel, because I think we'll be able to engage in these questions more. Right now, what I hope you can do is just add your questions and your comments in the chat. And I encourage you to come to the Lanel Foundation's website to learn more about the work that we're doing in terms of trying to understand what's happening in our region in education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, Dr. Tyson, and the Lanel Foundation for your ongoing work with teacher recruitment and retention. As we transition into our discussion, like Dr. Tyson just said, please feel free to put your thoughts and questions into the chat. As you do, I'm excited to introduce our moderator and discussion guests. Anpadita Flying Earth, today's moderator, is the Executive Director of the Native American Community Academy Charter School and of the Naka Inspired Schools Network, a network of schools that combines academic preparation, culture and identity, and holistic wellness for community transformation through young people. Dutta grew up as the youngest of 3 siblings on Standing Rock Reservation in South and North Dakota. He's Lakota, Dakota, Ojibwe, and Akmo Atom. He's a 3rd-generation college graduate and earned a BA from Cornell and an MBA from UNM. He's also a Pahara Fellow, Woodrow Wilson Fellow, and Kellogg Fellow. Dutta finds grounding in his identity and upbringing on Standing Rock, responsibility to his community, and expression of culture and language. His mother and grandmother raised him not to see his life as either culture or academic success, but both and much more. Apolonia Trujillo Gallegos grew up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of rural northern New Mexico. First in her family to attend college, she received a bachelor's from UNM, then taught 3rd and 4th grade in Phoenix. She joined TFA's recruitment team in 2011, where she increased recruitment in Arizona by 57%, tripled the diversity of recruits, and led ASU to be the #1 school in the nation for Latinx applicants. She earned a master's at ASU, then served as a faculty associate and was recognized in the National Ashoka U Education Awards. She sits on the Alumni Board of Directors for UNM, founded Mijita.co, a company to support and honor the female journey, and co-created 8 Moons Collective, a company comprised of thought leaders in pursuit of disrupting linear ways of living. Apolonia currently lives in San Diego and finds every excuse she can to visit her family in northern New Mexico. Dr. Gwen Perea-Warniment is the current Deputy Secretary for Teaching and Learning for the New Mexico Public Education Department. Overseeing 3 divisions, educator quality, curriculum and instruction, and assessment. With a little over 2 decades of experience supporting public education, Dr. Warniment has taught across the elementary to post-secondary landscape, chiefly focused on bilingual STEM education. Before joining NMPED, Gwen was program director for the Lanel Foundation, with a portfolio that included direct programming, advocacy, and grant making in support of public education. In this role, she supported teacher retention in rural districts, socio-emotional support systems, and professional learning for educators, including an inquiry science consortium. Gwen is passionate about student voice, culturally and linguistically sustaining instruction, and supporting educators in their reflective practice. She holds a doctorate in curriculum and instruction from New Mexico State University. Thank you for being here today to share your perspectives with our audience. We're going to start with some predetermined questions, then solicit questions from the audience. Keep chatting them in, and we may not get to everything, but we'll do our best to pull out themes. And with that, I will hand it over to Dutta.
Thank you so much, Missy. So happy to be in community with relatives, with friends, and good to see everyone this morning. I want to first start off with an embarrassing story about Mike. No, I'm just kidding, Mike. I'm not. I won't. I'll spare you the stories. But want to start off with Gwen and Apolonia. I'm hoping you can share a little bit about your own stories and what brought you into the field of education. Gwen, let's start with you.
Thank you, Dutta, and just want to honor you for being our facilitator, and thank you so much. It's always wonderful to be on any call with you. And I can add to the stories about Mike. Well, it's hard to tell your story and not be emotional. I'm very emotional, which sometimes to my detriment, but I think is a strength in a lot of ways. So I try to be open about it. My dad was an engineer and my mom was a teacher, and I was really influenced by both of them equally. My dad is very wise and grounded, and was a teacher in his own right. I think our parents are, and so I there's a lot that I am who I am because of him. But my mom was a really interesting particular teacher growing up. She started a program in Santa Fe called the Teen Parent Center. It was the first program of its kind. It was not part of what was called grads now in New Mexico, where we have actually a state-funded program. It was a standalone program that just really helped teen parents. And it started as a night school at the vocational tech school here in Santa Fe. I grew up here. And it was really interesting as a young girl to watch her sort of on this like almost boundary of social justice education that we didn't really have a name for, but it was she would reach out and she would support these young mothers and young fathers even at night, and at all times of the day, and take them what they needed for school. And she wrote these grants, like just trying to figure out the state system and connect with WIC and different programs, and raised funding to build a nursery for the students there at the VOTEC. And so when I got to be in high school, she was still doing this work. I mean, she started when I was probably about 5, I think. She went back to work maybe younger, 4 or 5. And I had one of close friend of mine who got pregnant in high school. And I remember walking her down to my mom's office down in the South Campus of Santa Fe High School, and seeing my mom in a whole different way that I had never seen before. And so I think that's really stuck with me and impacted me, I think, around why I entered the profession without really the intention to do so, because I didn't get my initial degree is not in education. I'm an alt licensed teacher. That was my entry. My initial degree was actually in English and Spanish, and went in to become a lawyer. Had applied, I was going to go to UNM Law School, and but fell into the profession. My very first year teaching actually was at Memorial Hospital in Albuquerque as a psychiatric facility for kids, which was intense and amazing and beautiful in its own way. But make a long story short, that was very impactful for who I am and where I am.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Always an inspiration to be with you as well. Apollonia, I'm gonna hand it over to you to tell us a little bit more about your own story and what brought you into the field of education.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen, for sharing your story. Yeah, and I feel like I need to travel to New Mexico to learn some stories about Michael soon. So that will be my summer plans, I guess. So I grew up in Barito, so Taos County. I went from Peñasco Independent School District for elementary school, and just had a really beautiful childhood. My family has lived on that land for a long time, and just my grandparents lived right by us, my aunts lived right by us. There was a lot of walking fields, crossing rivers, riding horses, planting just before organic was cool. I mean, it was just an amazing childhood. And my dad got a job when I was in the 4th grade that moved us to Santa Fe. And I was looking last night and trying to remember the name of it, because I remember I had to cross Alameda Street. We lived off of Oñate, kind of by Agua Fria. I think it's Gonzales Elementary, but I'm not 100% sure. But I went to school there for until October, and I remember just like very, very quickly, like not fitting into the school in terms of how, like my class had been much smaller in Penasco, and I just like academically had been doing really well in Penasco, and then that I was like struggling in this school. The academics were not meeting my needs. So I don't know how my dad managed to do it, but we finagled the system. My aunt was a teacher at DeVargas Middle School, and somehow we got me into EJ Martinez. And I don't know how EJ Martinez Elementary is these days, but it was like a good school when I was in 4th grade. And I had this teacher, Mr. Padilla, who I think like changed my life. He was phenomenal. We had this dark room where we like did photography, developed photos. We had a class garden. He would roll out this butcher paper on our tables, and we sat in Socratic circles. I didn't know obviously what that meant, in 4th grade, but we had this butcher table. We would draw paintings, and we read The Hobbit. We went through all of the 4th grade math book, and we're in 5th grade math book. I mean, this guy, I invited him to my wedding. I've nominated him for every possible like teacher award thing ever. Mr. Padilla with his ponytail and his Birkenstocks, like he was just the guy. He was awesome. And he made me love school. He just like, I believed in myself, and I believed in like my creativity and like who I was. And I just felt really at home there. And so we stayed another year in Santa Fe, and I had Miss Fleming for 5th grade in EJ, and we still was across the hall from Mr. Padilla. It was like, so still great. And then my dad's job moved us to Moriarty. And so we would still go home often to Penasco. I really identify with living in Vaditos. We have our family home there, but we moved to Moriarty, and that was a completely different experience for me too. So I finished 6th grade through 12th grade in Moriarty, and yeah, it was very rural, and I did really well academically, and I graduated co-valedictorian and was pumped to go to college, and I had a 21 on my ACT and thought that I was like rocking out. And I went to UNM, and I was placed in remedial math. I really had hit a glass ceiling that I didn't even know existed. I thought like that I had done well in life. And so that was really a wake up call for me. My freshman year at UNM was super hard. And I just was like, am I even going to be able to hack it? Like this whole time I thought I was awesome. And like, I'm really struggling. And so tutoring and wonderful programs and getting involved was part of Greek life. I wrote for the Daily Lobo, did a bunch of fun stuff with UNM, and ended up graduating cum laude, which I felt really honored about. I had to work my butt off, got to study abroad, did really cool stuff. But what I really realized my senior year of college was that education equated opportunities. I had done all this amazing stuff at UNM, but slowly started seeing my peers drop off. We all started together freshman year. Slowly people started to drop off. Luckily I had the lottery scholarship, but I also started to see like people that I went to elementary with like dropping off too. And so that's just like when I discovered Teach for America, and similar to Gwen, I had applied to UNM Law, because somehow for me, that was like how you make a difference. But anyways, long story short, I found Teach for America and applied and got in, and then I taught 3rd grade, and it was just really revolutionary. It was 3rd and 4th grade, it's combo split in 3rd grade in Phoenix. And then I've somehow made it onto the recruitment team, and I've been here ever since. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Thank you, Apollonia. I love the story about Mr. Padilla. I think we all have like Mr. Padillas in our stories. I'm going to stay with you, Apollonia. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the work you do with TFA recruitment team.
Yeah, so I've done a bunch of stuff. This is my 10th year on the recruitment team at Teach for America. I started off as a campus recruiter, and then I started managing campus recruiters, and I oversaw Southwest recruitment and Pacific Northwest recruitment. But 5 years ago, I kicked off our work on experiential recruitment. So really focusing in on early engagement, like finding people early on in their college careers and getting them interested in the prospect of going into education, and really like feeling convicted about making a difference in education. And so currently I serve as the Senior Managing Director of Experiences, and I put on really cool programming to get students just attracted to the mission Teach for America, the mission of social impact work, and the mission of eliminating educational inequity in our country. So next week I have a really cool wellness event that I'm putting on. You all can come to it. We have a wellness resource guide that we just created in our downloading, and I put on fellowships and internships and volunteer programs and all kinds of cool ways for college students to get involved with us.
That's awesome. Yeah, keep us posted for that event. That sounds cool. Gwen, part of the reason for this event is to really think about the long view on teacher recruitment. Can you share with us a little bit about the importance of this and what the state is currently doing to support more young people choosing teaching as a profession?
Sure. And if you as I'm talking, if you have any questions, or Apollonia, if you have anything that you want to add in this discussion, or please interrupt me. Don't hesitate to interrupt me. I think that the most important reason that we need to support our own students, our own communities, people, and to go into the profession is because that's how we're going to actually transform the system. Is when we have our own students who become educators and help to lead and build out new structures and new systems and break down the systemic racism and the historical oppression that education has been for generations. So that's probably the most important reason that we need to do this work. Second is, because we need educators. Clearly, we need educators. We need all adults who serve students. We need counselors. We need social workers. We need school nurses. We need any ancillary staff. We need educational leaders. We need people who help to build out, create systems of support for students. But I think superseding that is really this notion of transformation and helping us move forward in a way that is incredibly, it helps us own our own systems of education in the state of New Mexico and rebuild them or transform them or re-envision them or make them our own, which I think is part of the process. In terms of what we're doing as a state, I would say that it's sort of a slow process or slower rollout around initiatives. And so I want to just be upfront about that and honest about that right away. It's embedded in the strategic plan, and that's one of our 4 pillars of the strategic plan, is building out the educator ecosystem. But what's interesting about my position now in sort of reflecting over the past couple of years in this place is that a lot of the programming that we run at the state, so the public education department sort of functions in a couple of different ways. First is overseeing policy. So both, putting into play any statute that we receive from the legislature, any laws that they pass, right? So for instance, a K-5+ program, putting that in play. And then creating rule around different things. So what is rule that we create to sort of support and build out what needs to happen for schools? Like these are the standards in science, or these are this is the rule around licensure and endorsements. So that's sort of one function of the PED. And the second function is to run programs and the budget for schools, right? And that's above the line. But what we do is incumbent upon the budget we receive from the legislature. And that's a really important thing for all of us to recognize and see, and how the state, the executive branch, and the public education department needs to function in connection and in tandem with the legislature. We need that partnership. It's critical, because what we would want to do as the public education department, whatever we decide we think it would be best in terms of teacher recruitment, any program we would want to create, we need the legislature to be able to fund that. If we don't, we can have the best intentions. I can tell you from my position, I would love to have and stand up a fully funded teacher recruitment program, but it's not in our below the line funding. And so our ability to do so is incumbent upon that partnership and the relationships that we build there. So I think that's important for like the community at large to see and to help encourage all of us to work together, because I think we won't move as a state until we do so together. The things that we do have in place are, we have a $1 million allocation that was given, it's a below the line funding for teacher residencies. So we've sort of started to support, not sort of, but stood up supports and have issued grants to different particular institutions of higher education to build out teacher residencies in collaboration with the local area school districts. In some places, those have been more successful than others. There's limitations in, again, the language that was issued towards that teacher residency. So, you know, there's so many people on this call that I just love and who have been so instrumental in building out an educator ecosystem in the state. But one of those is Kim Lanoy on this call, and her program, right, is an alternative licensure program. And so with the teacher residency funding, we've been limited in being able to only fund some very, you know, a stricter program. So there's, you have to play in the space of what are the barriers that you're given in any of the funding streams that you receive. So there's, you know, teacher residency programs. I think in addition, we're sort of looking at what is it that we have in place in our licensure system in general. So we've set forward. One of the first things I did in coming into my position was rebuilding the educator evaluation system. So we now have Elevate New Mexico, wonderful system designed to support educators as opposed to a punitive system. I think that's a really important thing in the whole process of building out a supportive educator ecosystem. It's designed so that it's a collaborative process. It's tied to the professional development plan, all of those wonderful things. And then I think in addition, like the next iteration was, now let's attack for lack of a better word, and it sounds a little violent, but let's attack the licensure system and really kind of clarify what is happening in licensure, make it much more streamlined, clear, an online system, things that are better understood, really clarify endorsements, take a hard look at all of the different endorsements that are out there, make things much more accessible for everyone across the state. So we're sort of in that iteration now. That's the next thing that needs to happen. And then we're looking at principal evaluation. So there's like these timelines of things. Some things hinge on other things. So that's I think another process or work that we're doing at the State Department. But I do want to say that just to sort of wrap up this discussion, I mean, there's two more things. One is we don't focus enough on figuring out the barriers and addressing the barriers. I think we do a lot of work to address and understand what do we need to do. So for instance, the Lano Foundation, all my fellow workers there at the Lano Foundation has this beautiful report. And so we have these suggestions on recruiting our own, valuing and local voices and champions, establishing networks, right? These wonderful suggestions for what to do. But I think if we better understand the barriers for teachers or educators, we're going to be in a better place to move forward as well. So for instance, assessments, that's a huge barrier for many educators across the state, especially our educators who are EL learners. We have to do something. We have to address that. Funding, another significant barrier to support educators and people who are going through the field. What do you need to do to support them? If they're a young parent and they want to become a teacher or an educator, how do you support them through that process with childcare, with transportation, all of those things? What type of systemic supports are missing, completely missing, right? So any long-term mentorships, those types of things. Lack of training in terms of how to support school systems where you have student teachers or candidates or any field practicum that needs to happen, right? How do you support the LEA in working with and sort of moving through that tension that's going to be inherent in well-established educational systems that sometimes can be very stuck in the 20th century with work that we are trying to do to transform. And so you've got these teacher candidates who are all of a sudden set, put up against in place this inherent tension between wanting to rebuild and or create their classroom, their lesson, their relationships with students based on community and local wisdom, and include sort of movement towards the 26th century. And then there's all of a sudden in this context that's pulling them back. So how do you support both the teacher candidate as well as the school system to really be very mindful about that tension and work through it, because that's how we're going to all move forward. And then I think another real interesting barrier that we have to confront is simply the lack of clarity around professional growth. And why is it that we have to have very set, for most educators, you understand professional growth as teacher to principal to administrator. And that's your limited professional growth. And I think that that's not necessarily, if I wanted to be an engineer, if I looked at my father as another example to my mom, and my mom got very stuck. So she got her master's, and then she didn't want to be a principal. She just thought, well, go back to school. And she changed her job, and she's changed her focus from working with teen moms to bilingual education. And so you have to, as an educator, you're struggling to come up with creative ways to find your own leadership or your leadership path. And there is not clarity around professional growth in our profession. And it's very limited the way people perceive it. So totally, Erin. We do need teacher coaches. So those are some really distinct and powerful barriers that we have to confront in order to support the ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Gwen. And I appreciate your level of transparency and even speaking about what the work that the NMPED is doing. I want to take some time, just anyone who's listening and that has questions, if you can put it into the chat for Apollonia or Gwen. We have a few more minutes, about 6 more minutes before we want to wrap up, but I want to make time for any burning questions that folks may have from the audience on what you heard around teacher recruitment, around strategies, around what might be missing, what might be planned, what are some of the things that Gwen and Apollonia have found in their work. So I'm going to welcome any questions into the chat that folks may have for Gwen and Apollonia. And thank you so much for the deep dives, Gwen, that you did into like what does the state have planned?
While we're waiting for a question, and if there's one, flag one for me. But I do want to share a little bit about our federal relief funds and kind of what we're planning to do with the federal relief funds, because that is an investment that we must really strategically look at. You want to use federal funds in terms of a one-time investment that's going to have a large impact on the state and be mindful of a fiscal cliff and all of those things. So one thing that we are proposing to do that I feel like I haven't really seen this in any other state other than ours. It was something that we came up with as a team. So I've got Shauna and Danielle who are from my team on the call. And one thing that we sort of came up with was, how could we powerfully fund? Because this latest round of funding, ARPA funding, the PED, the state is getting about 120 million. That's a lot of money, right? So how could we create a program that funds teacher fellows for the state and would really be a high level investment for any person, undergrad, adult, youth, who wants to become an educator, and fund them into even an associate's have them in classrooms, fund them, like connect with higher ed, help fund fund the entire process. So sort of what I was talking about in terms of that workforce strategy, Jermaine will like that, like workforce strategy of looking at the comprehensive entire timeline that it takes for youth to move through and become an educator. So we're really excited about that. And that, as well as a campaign, like a recruitment and or just outreach campaign that really celebrates educators, because we need to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gwen, I think there's something around like the messaging for education and helping to get people just to realize what the need is and what their personal connection could be to the need. But then also it's like a very simple way for people to digest how to get plugged in. So whether that's actually like mapping out the certification route in a very easy, like hand-holding way. But I think like the ideal thing that we should all be in discussion around is like our education system was created 100 plus years ago. It's like not relevant for where we are right now. And COVID really disrupted just how we were operating. And so what can we do to actually shift some of the things that we now know in a really productive and collaborative way? And our biggest asset that anyone ever has, money will always run out, like everything will always sort of come to an end, but the thing that will never run out is people, and the ability to network and connect other people, and the like knowledge that people have. There's just ancestral wisdom that comes with like connecting people. And so I think like finding ways to actually make those cohorts of individuals to like network and get connected, and how much would it cost to really send a group of teachers to Santa Fe to the Capitol and like have a really cool professional development experience. Like there's ways to actually do it that don't cost a ton of money, but it takes like a group effort. It can't be only one sort of department or organization going at it. It's really collaborative.
Thank you so much, Apollonia. We're nearing time, and so I want to kick it over to both of you. First you, Gwen, and then Apollonia for closing thoughts. And I'm hoping you can kind of fold in some of the wonderings in the chat. And I'll voice over kind of what's happening in the chat. One is about teacher pay. How do we have a strong recruitment strategy with teacher pay, considering the pull to other fields that might be happening for young professionals? Another question is around like what sort of collaborative efforts is possible with legislature, and then the last kind of thought that I've and apologies if I didn't get your question, is any sort of like pathways for innovation, cutting edge approaches that's locally rooted and globally informed. So I'm hoping those three things you can kind of pack into your closing thoughts as we wrap up our discussion. So I'm gonna go first to you, Gwen. So the three things again are teacher pay, collaboration with the legislature, and any sort of innovation in terms of recruitment.
Okay, the first two, actually, teacher pay and legislature, are really good and easy to hit at once, because that's what we should be doing with the legislature. First and foremost is really continuing to advocate to your representatives as well as your senators to continue increasing teacher pay. It is the single most important thing that we could do to support professionalizing the profession. Educators need to be making double what they make. Right? If we could have a first-year teacher make $90,000, I don't know that it would be enough. Yeah, this is a noblest of noble professions. It is extremely important. On it resides our future as a community, and so supporting and valuing that with funding in terms of individual pay is probably most important. So continuing to fund the education system is really important, but particularly teacher salaries. And to that light, just connecting with your representatives and senators and ensuring that asking questions. I think that's a good place to actually begin to start and build relationships with them, is ask them questions. Like, how do you approach this? Or what do you think about this? And even if you, I think asking them questions in a really authentic way where you're not necessarily judging, but you just want to know and you're curious and you ask them questions about different policy or, what happened during the session? Can you explain to me or tell me a little bit about that? Because I think they really appreciate that. They want to connect with their constituency. They want to support you and think, for the most part, I think they're people from New Mexico, from our communities. So I think really doing our due diligence as constituents and as civic participants to connect with them is probably the most important thing that you could do. And like questions around how funding works, because it's complicated in New Mexico. There's some really great things about it, but it's complex, the below the line, the middle, the above the line, the SCG, how the SCG works, how the state forest funding works, how does capital outlay work? All of that is a pretty complex system. I think that's probably one of the most important things you can do, because then they will listen to you when you do have something that you have an opinion on, because you've built that relationship. And just like teaching is all about relationships, so is too that connectivity with your legislature. And me, continues to connect with me. I think the question or the comment by Megan in the chat is really beautiful. And that's maybe the hardest thing to address, but the most important. And it's over time, and it's things layered on top of each other. So there's a few things that I would say we've done that I'm very, very proud of, but are not enough. But they were critical to being able to move other things. And the first is being able to shift how we think of assessment in the state. And we still have the requirements of federal requirements of assessment. But as we work slowly to build out a balanced assessment system that leans heavily on formative assessment, the classroom work of the teacher in assessment, that leans heavily on innovative assessment and portfolios and capstone projects, and less on these summative assessments that don't make sense in terms of metrics around how we're doing and how are problematic anyway when you're using an assessment that's not culturally relevant or tied to community or the actual objectives or the what you want from a graduate or your student, whatever grade level they're at. The closer the tie the assessment is to the actual skills of the student and their context and their community, right, the more meaningful it is. Mm-hmm. So moving forward with a new assessment system, a new evaluation system, all of those things, those new systems sort of then begin to allow for new growth. And it's really interesting or important how much time it takes to undo systems so that new systems can grow.
Yeah.
Can I say something about systems real quick that I think is interesting?
Yeah, and feel free to any final thoughts after that too. Yeah.
This new generation, Gen Z, like they are not trying to follow the systems. Like they are making cash off of TikToks. They're having their own YouTube channels. They have multiple like entrepreneurial efforts, like, sort of the whole side hustle culture that are like, world has come up with. Like the students that we're interacting with, some of the students that I interact with have already founded their own companies and nonprofits and are doing really cool things. And so they're not really going to wait around for like to follow some linear path. Like they're actually going to like make up their own path to get what they want to do. And I think what's really interesting is that while people go into a field, they also they actually want to have some sort of like try it on. They want to like be able to experience it before they decide something. So you see all these other industries that are allowing job shadow days or one-day fellowships or things that people can go in and test it out. And I think that's really important for education. And that's where this like experiential recruitment comes in, because students also don't just want to go and like have this like day where it's like, oh, look how great this is, let me shadow it. It's like, no, actually, I want to try it out. What does it mean to work at Google? Give me a problem and let me try to figure out how this culture is. And so it's like the same thing for education. What does it mean to go in to make an impact? Can they taste that? Can recruitment efforts actually propel forward education? So can you, like, can the state of New Mexico and work with all the different bodies of these of institutions that are training the next, potential education force, but to actually go into schools and like make an immediate impact. We launched this one-day volunteer experience this past fall where we matched teachers to college students and basically said, hey, what's something right now with COVID that you just like cannot do and you need help with? And people were like, I need like someone to build out my online Google Suite resources. And it's like, cool, let's give you a volunteer to do that. And students turn around and they apply to Teach for America afterwards because they're like, that was really impactful. I felt my impact. So I think like if you can give tangible ways for people to make immediate impact, try it out. And then also recognize that people are not going to follow this like linear path. They're going to like decide how to do their own thing. And quite frankly, people don't stay in the same careers forever. So like, we shouldn't be expecting people to be classroom teachers forever, right? They're like a classroom teaching career can happen and is great when it does if that's someone's calling, but there might be a lot of other things they want to explore, a lot of side hustles or a lot of other stuff. And so it's like actually making room for all of that to be possible is like, is sort of where we have to go as a country, as a state, as federal recruitment. Anyway, that's my thought.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you both for your insights. I feel like we can be talking about this topic for the next hour and have gems flowing in and out, have the chat lighting up with all of the insights and the questions. So I just want to extend my gratitude to both of you for everything that you do for the state, for the country, for the field of education, and want to wrap this part of our discussion, even though I want to keep it going. And just thank you both for being here. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Missy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. What a great discussion. And thanks, Duta, for moderating. I'm excited to head into the next part of our agenda, which is featuring some bright spots in teacher recruitment in New Mexico. So first up, we're going to hear from NMSU Educators Rising program. And this one's going to go fast. So we'll be dropping some links in the chat where you can kind of follow up and learn more about these organizations after our event today. Okay, and with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Cecilia Hernandez.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am Cecilia Hernandez. I am a associate college professor at New Mexico State University, and I am the advisor for the Educators Rising Collegiate chapter here at NMSU. I'm also the clinical director of alternative license and science methods instructor. So I wear lots of hats, as all educators do. But I'm going to talk to you about Educators Rising. So Educators Rising, the collegiate aspect of it bore out of Dr. Trujillo's work with the Educators Rising at the high school level. It is, so just a little bit about what Educators Rising is. The mission of Educators Rising is to cultivate highly skilled educators. They want to guide young people on that pathway to become accomplished teachers. So they want to begin in high school and extend through college and on into the profession. So Dr. Trujillo began at that high school level with our teacher academies, and Educators Rising is rebranded from Future Teachers of America. And so they've rebranded themselves. They've actually joined with PDK, which is the a larger national educators program as well. So that's more recent. But Dr. Trujillo's vision was to bring children, young people in at the high school level, get them working in classrooms with younger students, and then coming on into the university, into the teaching profession. So she brought me on board as the advisor back in 2014, when she began cultivating this, at that level. So I've been the advisor since then, and we've had, lots of changes, fluxes, students come and students go, but we were the first in the state to have a collegiate chapter. Fortunately, we're not the last. So we have several of the universities on the state now have come on board with the Educators Rising, have collegiate chapters. The second student organizational president, Sophia Villa, she was a student at GISD and Educators Rising. So she was in their chapter at high school. She came on into the university and began as a freshman as an Educators Rising member. She became the chapter president. She graduated last year, and now she is in Texas Women's College Education, the Deaf Master's Degree Program. So she wants to go into the classroom, but she wants to work with the special population. Our current president and treasurer are both members of Educators Rising, and they were also in their high schools there in the Albuquerque area. Two of our students now. And so what we do in our Educators Rising chapters, we do a lot of community service. So we host game nights and fun days on campus. So we bring the community onto campus to expose children to to education as well as to the university environment. Because even though we share the community of Las Cruces with all the schools, a lot of our students have never been on campus. Excuse me. A lot of our students also support local science nights. We do literacy nights, field days. So all of our students work in the community. They work with children. And so it kind of keeps them, this is what my students have told me, excuse me, I apologize, is that it actually solidifies their goal into going into education, because they get to work with children. They get into the community, and they get early field experiences before they even get the field experiences in our program. And then they're supported through the process. So they learn how to, we do some nights where I talk about how to get into our teacher education program. We have visitors from other my colleagues that talk about the testing, that Dr. Werneman mentioned. Those tests are a big thing. And so we do some study nights. We've done study nights. We've done, just some demonstrations on, what it is, how do you get to the website, what do you look for, how do you take the test, how do you pay for the test, because that's another barrier, because those tests are expensive, and then how you progress through the whole program itself. And that's pretty much it. I think that's my 5 minutes.
You really packed those 5 minutes with tons of great ideas that I hope other folks can use in their own Educators Rising programs, or just in general as they're recruiting teachers. Next up is Isabella Aldana. She's a current Teach for America Corps member in the Rio Grande Valley, and will be coming home to New Mexico to teach next year at the New Mexico School for the Arts.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Isabella Aldana. I am a super proud daughter of New Mexico, and my journey kind of starts when I left for college. I traveled across the country to Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I did not major in education. I did not get my certification to become a teacher. However, that was always an interest for me. So coming into graduation, I did a couple internships between the summers of my high school in Colorado, where I was teaching summer school, and I really knew that my place was in the classroom and I wanted to return there for a longer commitment. And so I applied to Teach for America, and I actually was hoping I would return home to New Mexico. That was kind of the goal. But when I was placed in the Rio Grande Valley here in Texas, I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason. And so I took it, right? So that's what brought me here to Texas. I'm in my second year As a Teach for America core member, we dedicate 2 years to the classroom and our placement region. And so now that I'm completing my second year, I will be returning home to New Mexico to teach at my high school, the New Mexico School for the Arts. I teach 8th grade US history. And so in the most sincere, authentic history teacher that I am, I divided my experience into pull factors and push factors. So things pulling me back home and things pushing me out of the system and the campus that I currently work at. So my pull factors, I think one of the largest and most personal reasons is the multicultural community that thank you so much. I saw the chat box. Thanks. Is the multicultural community that I wasn't aware of living in New Mexico. And so someone who is multiracial, someone who was raised in a multiracial community and being able to attend New Mexico School for the Arts, which I think embodies this idea of multicultural instruction, has been something that I learned after leaving to college that I wasn't aware of, as I mentioned, when I was actually in New Mexico. And so wanting to return to that belonging and return to that space, as I mentioned, the goal was always to go back home. And as for cliche as it sounds, it is 100% giving back to my community. I don't think I would have made it so successfully and lived so far away from home had I not known that the people at my high school, my friends and my family, were there cheering me on every step of the way. So some of the push factors, a lot of these ideas come from discussions that I've had the opportunity of having and reflecting on through my Teach for America experience. And so the largest issue that I find, and I'm actually on campus right now, so hopefully, they're not like listening in on me, but are different styles of leadership. And so I think that there are different styles of leadership. And I think that my idea of leadership and my campus's idea of leadership are very different. I know that we wear different hats, but I get frustrated with what I'm going to call the system, and that is standardized testing. That is the numbers we place on students for funding, and the number that I feel gets placed on myself as an evaluation as a teacher. And so I think similarly, at the start of my Teach for America experience, we created these things called vision rocks. And they're basically 3 words that you kind of want to guide you through your teaching experience. And one of them was leadership. So I want to be able to experience more of that for myself and see more of that in my classroom, where I feel that the education, at least in Texas, that I've experienced is very close-minded, and we base students off of standardized testing and things like that. And the other push factor that I think is very important to note is ageism. And so I feel like being the youngest teacher on campus, having become an educator immediately after education, I am seen as less valuable, I'm seen as less experienced, and so therefore I do feel very brushed off. And just to close out on my last slide, some of my hopes for returning home to New Mexico, and I think some things that could help other educators help other educators and bring educators to the classroom, is this idea of flexibility. And so being able to have become certified without mastering in education or majoring in education during college, but being able to enter the classroom and now being able to move from Texas to New Mexico, I think is a huge asset to education. So I think changing the narrative of teachers work too hard and there's too much overtime, which is absolutely true, but also pointing out some of the benefits, right? Some of the highlights of teaching. And then I think just the final thing I will mention is my hopes for returning to New Mexico is bringing this community. I've had a lot of different experiences outside of New Mexico, bringing this community into my soon-to-be community in the classroom, and getting to connect students to more. As I mentioned, I joined a little late, but the speakers earlier were talking about essentially a project-based learning where you're getting students involved in more entrepreneurial opportunities and getting them involved in hands-on activities versus the standardized testing and teaching to the test that I think takes out the meaning and the definition of what education actually is. So that's what I have to share with you today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Next up is Tracy Cordero with the Karis Children's Learning Center. KCLC takes an innovative and expansive view of recruiting the next generation of teachers. And I'm excited to hand it over to you, Tracy.
Thank you so much, Missy. Good morning or afternoon. Maybe some of you are further out in the time zone. My name is Tracy Cordero. I am from Coach T. Pueblo, and I am the director of the Indigenous Montessori Institute for the Karis Children's Learning Center. So as I talk, I'm going to be using a lot of acronyms and alphabet soup, and I'll try to be as clear as possible. So the Karis Children's Learning Center is a language revitalization school in Coach T. Pueblo that uses the Montessori philosophy to deliver an education that best serves our students to be Coach T children. And so our teachers require two very specific criteria that have not been available in any other teaching preparation program. That is Karis fluency, so our heritage language of Karis, and then the Montessori credential. And because you can't go to UNM and SIPI and College of Santa Fe and become fluent in Karis or get a Montessori credential, we had to create our own teacher preparation program, and that's the Indigenous Montessori Institute. So this graphic represents the relationship between KCLC and the program of IMI. And through IMI, we do advocacy work, we do professional development and technical assistance, and then we do teacher training. And our teacher training track consists of two separate tracks. One is PIE, you see there, PIE, the philosophy of Indigenous education, and Montessori. And we offer Montessori through the Indigenous worldview, through the Indigenous lens. And so when we think about teacher recruitment, that word for us is a heavy duty word, recruitment, because of Western society, because of white supremacy culture. There's something bold about that word, recruitment. Come here, we're the best. Come here, we can do this for you. Come here, we show you the right way. And so for us, we don't necessarily do recruitment in that way, right? We want to do everything with integrity to our culture. So at the school level, KCLC, we don't recruit children. We say, here's an option. Here's what we're striving to do with our educational program. And that follows at IMI. We don't necessarily recruit people, but we say, here's what our hope is with regard to education. With regard to Indigenous education, we are striving to reclaim the education of our children through teacher training. And so if you want to do that, come see us and we'll show you what we know and the best way that we know without promising you that what we do is going to work for you. So we want to be a resource. And one of the ways that we think about teacher training is first by doing away with who is the expert. Who is a teacher, and according to who and what and how, right? And so when we think of a teacher, yes, science and math and reading and writing is important, but our 80-year-old grandmas and grandpas in Cochiti, those are our teachers. Those are our teachers, and the current, public education system doesn't value them in the way that they mean to us as Cochiti people. The system doesn't allow them to exist as experts in a school setting. And so those are some of the ways that we talk about teacher training, that we talk about teacher preparation, is about shifting your framework shifting the paradigm about what teacher is. A teacher is what teacher training should be, and what school should be. I'm sorry, Missy, you can change the slide. I'm just over here going on. So the Indigenous Montessori Institute, like I said, we strive to reclaim the education of our children through teacher training. We absolutely unapologetically want to promote the inherent right of Indigenous tribes to exercise educational sovereignty, right? It is our right to govern, provide healthcare, justice, education in a way that is going to sustain us as a people. And the Western education system does not do that for us. We want to restore our own Indigenous knowledge systems as educational models, right? And earlier in the chat, someone said, what is data? Redefining what data is, absolutely. And let me say that our existence as Indigenous people, there's no other data source that is going to outdo our existence, right? There's been 500 years of federal policy to do away with us as a whole people, and yet we're still here. So something about our way of life is the right way to do things. And so reminding us that we have our own educational ways in our communities, and to better center them, to uplift them, we need to and want to disrupt and dismantle systems of white supremacy culture in Indigenous education. Next slide, please. In talking about teacher training and talking about specifically centering Indigenous education, we say that we first have to start with an anti-racist, anti-biased approach to education. Indigenous people are the most invisible people in this country. You all saw the CNN poll, right? Something else. And so first we need to do anti-racist work. And when we can lay that anti-racist foundation, when we shine the light on the darkest, most deepest place, everything else is illuminated in that. And when we do anti-racist education, everybody benefits. We can make everything our own so that each child gets what they need out of an education. And we ask our educational leaders to shift your thinking so that we can decolonize the education in the classroom and the system. So not just the content, not just what people are reading, but what does budget looks like that allows that content to exist? What is policy and procedure doing to support Indigenous educators to nurture Indigenous children? So total alignment from top down and bottom up. And then emphasizing Indigenous knowledge systems at the early childhood education level, because that's the foundation. That's when to us, our babies are the most sacred. And so we want to feed them all we know in terms of Indigenous knowledge systems. And so we do this through our teacher training, and I guess strategies in teacher recruitment is that we honor the whole teacher just like we honor the whole child. So if you can speak Karis, that counts just like a master's degree counts. If you are participating in your tribal community, that counts the same way your higher ed degree counts. And when those things count, the pay scale counts too. And so we increase salary based on these things that are meaningful to your Indigenous respective communities, our communities. We align our calendars so that our teachers don't have to choose between participating tribal members or coming to work. No, we're all off at the same time because we don't have to choose. You know, we're not leaving our way of life at the door anymore. So calendar alignment to traditional activities, to traditional calendars, paying based on skill level and skills as defined by us as they relate to our way of life. And ensuring that these are in policy throughout. And so those are some of the things that we do with regard to teacher prep and asking people to come on this educational, reclaiming the education of our children journey with us, and talking about what it means to be a teacher. I think that might be more my time, so I'll stop. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I want to do a quick plug. I think you have an event coming up later this week where you'll speak much more expansively and in detail about all of this. So check out KCLC's website or social media to learn when that event is and get registered. And last but not least, I'd like to invite in Tony Monfaletta with Future Focused Education. Thank you for being here.
Morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Future Focused Education is we're a nonprofit in Albuquerque, and we're an incubator for new schools and a hub for the Leadership High School Network in Albuquerque. And we're working on a new school that'll actually be in Santa Fe. We're in the planning stages right now. And the school is really imagined through the vision that we have for our own organization, which is to make communities healthier, more prosperous. And that really means breaking down the barriers between school and community, and actually the idea of reciprocity. So what's good for the community is good for the school, and what's good for the school is good for the community. And you know, for a long time, we've lived through this paradigm of the community is supposed to support what the school is already doing. And there's very little time or attention given to what would make the community a better place to live, what would make it more healthy and more prosperous, and how could the school actually make a contribution to making the community a better place to live. And so through our ideas around reciprocity, we believe that teachers are really an essential building block to the health and prosperity of local communities. And so through our planning process, we've been engaging with lots of community folks in Santa Fe that are working to make Santa Fe a better place to live. And we're really building on the idea that by engaging young people and creating a school that has young people working in areas that are already, where local nonprofits are already doing work. So work in housing, work in poverty work, that young people will learn how to engage, and they'll become teachers that are invested in their own community and invested in making their cities better places. And so this idea is being teased out through this graphic that I have up on the screen right now. The vision, the mission of the school is to make Santa Fe a better place to live. The vision is to have teachers as community developers. And what we're teasing out right now through the planning process is the future. What is the future of the teaching profession? If the teaching profession is not isolated to classroom instruction and assessment, things like that that have already been discussed, but instead teachers as community developers, well, how do we create young people that are able to lead in that way? The second area is really around this idea of positive identity and breaking down the systematic racism that young people face and that communities face, and really becoming a school that young people are appreciated for who they are and where they come from, and that they succeed because of that instead of in spite of that. And that's, which is the subtext for a lot of our structures that we have in the education system. And so we're really talking about changing that by young people appreciating where they come from and who they are, that's a strategy to dismantle racism. It's also a strategy, and something that Gwen had talked about, which is around the graduation capstone work. You know, it's maybe counterintuitive to think about that you're breaking down racism by working outside the building, by working in the community and developing an appreciation for where you come from and who you are, that's not necessarily work that happens in the building. That's work that happens by engaging and appreciating the local wisdom of where you come from. And that's really at the heart of the graduation capstone work that we're helping the Department of Education with, and really at the heart of this school as well. And then the final pillar is around developing care and concern for young people. So what does it take to have a care and concern model? What does a teacher need to know and be able to do to support young people and support their families? And so if you just think about this model, what you're really doing is you're investing in a new vision of what educators are, and really a generational vision that we have young people who care about their communities, and we're giving them an opportunity to have a career where where through education they're making their communities better places to live and healthier and more prosperous. So we're in the planning stage now. We're engaging with a lot of folks to try to understand how this vision can become a reality, and we're probably a year and a few months from launching. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you to everybody who shared as part of the Bright Spots part of today's event. And that it brings us pretty much to our closing. I want to thank everybody who attended today. I appreciate your participation and engagement, and I hope you're leaving inspired and with some new ideas about how to recruit the next generation of teachers in your own settings. And along with that, I'm hoping that you might see Teach for America New Mexico as a partner in that work. If there are things that we can do to support you in your Educators Rising program, or reaching out to folks who graduated from your schools, or experiential events that get people to see the impact that they can have as educators and get excited about the possibility of becoming teachers, please let us know. Well, we're dropping a survey link in the chat. We'd love to hear your feedback on this event, because we hope to have future events that focus on other parts of the teacher continuum, as well as picks up on what are the next steps with teacher recruitment. And again, just thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and please take the survey. Bye, everybody.